This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Mac and Jack Show. My name is Jamie Pags, the Philly sports guy, and I am here with Hall of Fame boxer, writer, and sports enthusiast Jack Hurst. Good morning, Jack. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Pags. I found out just before we went on the air an announcement you're going to make about the length of today's show. I mean, after you make the announcement, I'll vent a little bit.
Well, I tell you, so today I leave to go to Detroit, so we're only going to be doing an hour show today. You only get us for half the time, and I'm going to make it time's yours, as Andy Reid would say.
I take some notes beforehand. I come to this show prepared. I don't wing it the way you kind of wing it. I come prepared. I mean, I can wing it if I have to, but I don't like to. I believe, to be professional at all times. Not that you're not, okay? But I've got my own style. So I had to eliminate some things from 2 hours down to 1 hour. I had to put some stuff in the more important box, like the way they used to have it in baseball, first division, second division. So my first division stuff, I had to decide what to do with my mention with Keith Hernandez, who covered the Pittsburgh Pirate games for the Mets. He went to Pittsburgh after saying he wouldn't go to Philadelphia. But I might save that for another time, okay? Because the Mets did sweep a doubleheader. They're still in first place by a half game over Atlanta. But, people don't panic in New York the way they do in Philadelphia. I mean, the Mets were sitting comfortably in first place all year. They're only a half game ahead of Atlanta. But the Met fans, at least they realize their team is playing well. It's not because they're messing up. It's because Atlanta themselves is playing really great. But in Philadelphia, they'd be panicking. If the Phillies won 9 of their last 10, the fans would be panicking if another team won 10 out of 10 in the game of them. It's the city of panic in Philadelphia at times.
I would say that you are so wrong. First off, obviously the Mets are having a little bit of an issue since they happened to sweep that doubleheader, but they did get spanked by the Pirates the day before 8-2. So, and that's what got them into that virtual tie. And can't tell me that not all New Yorkers are just calm, cool, and collected, because you got Jerry Seinfeld out there who's saying, oh, the reason why the Mets are stinking so bad right now is because they had Tommy Trumpet come out and do that stupid trumpet performance. First off, I mean, you always see his box empty. He doesn't even go to these games. Right, the Edwin Diaz talk. But you always see Seinfeld out there. He doesn't even go to these games, and now he feels like he's an authority on why the Mets are going through a little slump.
Well, Edwin Diaz has cooled off a bit. Let's be honest about it. He's had a great year, but recently it's been, so. How many of these celebrities are actually major fans, genuine fans? I don't mean they like the sport, but even if they weren't well known and they were just an ordinary person out there in society, how many of them would be going to the games the same way, provided they could afford to go and get the ticket? We give Spike Lee his props because
that's exactly it. That was the first person that came to mind.
He's a genuine fan. Jack Nicholson, he's a genuine fan. Is Seinfeld really a big fan, or does he just go to some of the games because it's something to do? Or does he really wear the team on his sleeve? Because Spike Lee does, Jack Nicholson does. You feel they're like really, really into it, genuinely. I don't know about a number of them, but listen, you see even at the tennis matches, Serena Williams playing, all the celebrities show up because it's kind of the place to be in a sense. I remember the first Ali Frazier fight. Every celebrity wanted to be there because they want to be seen. They want to be like part of the action. And when a team's done very poorly, how many celebrities are really there? I mean, does Philadelphia have any celebrities that go to the game? Have any celebrities come out of Philadelphia non-sports? I mean, I don't know, Pax. I mean, you're the Philly guy. Would you get a celebrity? This is the biggest test. A celebrity at a Philadelphia Flyer game right now.
So the last celebrity that, the last celebrity that I saw at a Philadelphia Flyers game was Joe Montana.
Wow, Joe Montana, the Flyer.
So actually sat right in front of me. Got a pic. I didn't get a picture with him because the person I brought with me was like, "No, you're not going to," and bother him. I'm like, "What? She had no idea who I am and was trying to deal with me that way." But Joe Montana went to a Flyers game, which was a big surprise. I mean, I knew he was from Pennsylvania, but he was from the western part of the state. But he was at a Flyers game, and it was interesting to see. Other than that, when you see celebrities that go to hockey games, typically will go into the suites, so you don't get to see them. They're not dealing with the crowd. When I think of basketball games, you have a little bit more. I mean, Freddie Mitchell is not necessarily a celebrity, but you always see him on a lot of sporting events. Meek Mill, who is a rapper, you'll see him at Sixers games and such like that. You'll see them more at basketball games than hockey games. As far as football games, the moment that baseball season's over, you'll see Mike Trout just about at every Eagles home game. So that's kind of a celebrity in that regards. But I think about
warm my heart. A story about Hank Aaron. He used to go to the Cleveland Brown games. He was a Cleveland Brown fan, and he sat in the dog pound. The dog pound was, but in the seats behind the end zone, over there. And the fans would act a certain way. And Hank Aaron came dressed in a disguise, and no one would recognize him. And he got away with it for a while. And finally, a fan recognized him. You're Hank Aaron, and he denied it at first. You can't blame him for denying it. I don't consider that lying. I consider that you're just trying.
Yeah, because you don't want to create a panic or.
But the fans said, yes, you are. Didn't buy a story. The other fans noticed. And it wasn't the same for him anymore. So he stopped doing it. Not that the fans were nice to him. By all accounts, they were very, very nice to him and thrilled to have him amongst them. But it didn't, happen. Seinfeld, I could tell you something. This is the truth. He puts down Mario from Australia. I got no respect for Jerry Seinfeld for what he did here in Sydney, Australia. I have no idea what he did.
I have no idea either. But no.
I don't want to know. But I will say this. I haven't watched one episode of Seinfeld ever. That's hard to believe, ever.
Good for you. I've watched like 3, so we're in that same boat.
Did he have Keith Hernandez on a couple of episodes or something? A Steinbrenner?
I don't care. I don't care. Probably. He probably did.
If I wanted to start watching Seinfeld, imagine I could watch every episode like it's new. But I just have nothing against Seinfeld from my end. I just never, for whatever reason, started watching the show. And who wants to put the investment of time, after on? Because
I don't really like that kind of humor. It's not my type. So, I mean, and really, I always thought that it was the Yankees that they would talk about because George worked for the Yankees in that show. So,
yeah,
whatever. Not important. It really isn't. Like I said, Seinfeld doesn't move the needle for me. The fact that he's bagging on his own team because of something that I thought was worthwhile. Again, I'm not a Mets fan, but I thought that whole trumpet entrance was something. Again, that was something cool, something fun that the team did specifically for one of their players to pump up the crowd, and it worked. They won that game. They ain't won many games since then, but they won that game. And I don't understand how somebody can come off and say that type of stuff.
I'm going to tell you, comparing the two crowds this year only this year with the Mets and the Yankees, in my opinion, there's more electricity in the Met crowd than there is in the Yankee crowd. I mean, the Yankee crowds are enthusiastic still, and it's still more of a Yankee town than a Met town, New York. But you could tell the electricity's there. With the Mets, there's a little bit more of a buzz. The Yankees, they're under more pressure. And it seems that way. The Yankees are bringing up all these young players and they're counting on them because they've had a number of injuries. But what team hasn't had their share of injuries? And for the Yankees, if they won the World Series this year, it would be considered a tremendous relief. If the Mets won it, it would be considered a tremendous joy. That's the difference. The Mets can get eliminated short of the World Series, but just make a nice run at getting towards the World Series the way they're doing now, and fans will be happy. You know, they'll wait for next year. Of course, expectations will go up for the following year, so the equation might change then. But for now, the pressure is squarely on the Yankees. Anything short of at least bare minimum getting to the World Series, there's going to be great discontent. The Mets don't have that pressure at all.
So let me ask this question for you. Say that the Mets falter here in the next 21 games or 17 games, however many games are left, and they lose the division lead to the Braves. You know, and that's really, and then they go up against the Phillies in the wild card round, and they lose to the Phillies. Would that be considered a failure now after everything that's happened this season?
I wouldn't call it not quite a failure, but it would be disappointing how the season turned out, but not the type of disappointment where fans are fed up because they see the Mets made a lot of moves and they're going to think, well, how much more could we have done? You know, it just didn't quite work out on the field. They're not going to question the moves by the Mets front office so much or the Met ownership, who in the Met ownership is very popular right now, Steve Cohen. Unlike the Yankees, they're going to be calling for the manager to be fired. No one's going to call for Buck Showalter to be fired.
No, he's actually done pretty well with this team right now.
Aaron Boone, they're going to call for him to be fired. No one's going to really call. I think Sandy Alderson, Epler, you know, the Met front office there might be a little discontent, but very little. But nothing like Brian Cashman's going to face, okay? It would be disappointing if they you're right, they lose a division lead and the Phillies beat them in the first round, something like that. You're correct, only because the Mets fans are going to feel, you know, we should be a little better than the Phillies, be able to beat them. I think the same,
especially after the way that they've handled them all season long. I mean, the Mets have had our number ever since we lost that game in the ninth inning, and they scored 7 or 8 runs to beat us 9-8. I mean, that game was the defining moment for the Phillies and Mets for the regular season. Now, obviously, if we get to the playoffs, the injury bug is starting to creep up a little bit on the Mets right now as Scherzer goes back onto the IL. And, you know, obviously DeGrom has been pitching still lights out. He actually pitched great yesterday. But ultimately, it's, you know, there is a little bit of nervousness going into the playoffs, especially with the Braves playing so great right now. You know, they picked the right time to start to get hot, and the Mets not being as hot. Obviously, the Phillies have a very easy schedule for moving forward. I mean, we have the Marlins today, then the Washington Nationals, and then the Marlins again before we have a 2-game series with Toronto. And we haven't been able to beat an AL team yet this year except Seattle and the Angels. But ultimately, it's, you know, for the most part. And then we end with the Braves. So it's going to be an interesting end of the season to see how everything goes. And I mean, I don't want to face the Mets. I'm not really interested in doing that. But if I was going to, I wouldn't mind doing it right now while they're getting bit by this injury bug.
But I don't think the Phillies are under a lot of pressure, because it's my impression the Philadelphia fans are okay with the team getting eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, they don't want that, as long as the Phillies are taking a serious step towards World Series contention next year, because they haven't been in the playoffs for a while, the Phillies. So they get in this year. You know, the Joe Girardi era didn't quite work out. They made a run at the playoffs a couple of the couple of full seasons he was with them. They didn't get there. So in a sense, getting to the playoffs is the next step. Okay. Anything they do beyond the first round, imagine the Phillies get to the World Series and win it. Wow. I mean, that would be over the top. But no one is really expecting it. They're in the same spot, kind of like the Eagles were last year. People were just happy when they got in the playoffs. So even though they lost in the first round, that's fine. And even this year with the Eagles, well, if you do better than you did last year and you go deeper into the playoffs, the year will be a success. And then by next year, anything short of the Super Bowl, no. Eagle fans aren't going to be content with that anymore. Sometimes the team overachieves too much too soon, and then expectations get moved up, and then you're very, very disappointed in them. A case could be in Major League Baseball. The Baltimore Orioles probably aren't going to make the playoffs this year. I think there's something like 4.5 games out of the final wild card spot. They might still do it, but I don't think so. But people are going to look back, wow, they played over 500 and all. Let's assume the year keeps going the way it is. And by next year, the Orioles people are going to think are ready to make the playoffs. And if the Orioles go back to being something like the team of before, go 75-87 next year, big disappointment. I mean, that's just the way it works out. It's all about expectations, Pat.
So speaking of expectations, let's talk about this because we have real football tonight. Football season begins at 8:25, where the Bills take on the Rams. Now, obviously, the Rams were the champs last year. The Bills have tons of expectation. Does that expectation start to become a burden like that, where they've been to the playoffs a couple of years? They are expected. Most of the pundits, most of the media is choosing the Bills to be in the Super Bowl from the AFC side. And is it really any short? If you don't make the Super Bowl, that it's a failure if you're the Bills. And is the expectation start to become the weight of the world on their shoulders? If they don't win tonight, even like could the world start to weigh heavy on this team if they don't win tonight and don't make a very serious run to be in the Super Bowl?
For tonight, the answer is no, because it's 17 games. The Rams could beat the Bills by 3 touchdowns tonight, but if the Bills get it together, start playing well, it'll be a forgotten game. Like the Packers last year, they got blown out by the New Orleans Saints the first game of the season. And then the Packers wound up having the best record in the NFL during the regular season. And if it wasn't for a number of miscues by their special team in the playoffs against the 49ers, they would have played the Rams the next week in Green Bay in the NFC Championship game. And the Rams actually would have been favored. So it may have been them going to the Super Bowl playing Cincinnati had they gotten by the 49ers. But that's another story with the playoffs. The point is the Packers got blown out opening game and still had the best regular season record. But the answer to your question, with the expectations with the Bills, they're under enormous pressure this year. Anything short of at least going to the Super Bowl and probably winning it is going to be considered a failure. You go to the Super Bowl, you lose it. I won't say it would be considered a failure for the Bills. The fans are going to be a little disappointed, but they wouldn't look at the year as being a failure. But let's say the Bills go to the AFC Championship game and they lose there. I don't care how valiantly they play. They could play the Chiefs, the Chargers, whoever, and they lose a thriller 41-38. I don't think their fans are going to meet them getting you off the plane or outside the stadium if it's a home game or whatever. I don't think their fan base is going to turn on them, but they're going to be deflated. They're going to be very deflated. If they don't win the Super Bowl this year, Pax, when are they going to win it? I don't want to hear a team keeps knocking on the door, because you're not in a prime position forever. Other teams are going to catch up to you. You're going to slip just a little bit, and grab this when you can. All the pressure's on the Bills. There's more pressure on the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl this year, really, than any other team in the AFC, for sure. For sure. In the NFC, my guess would be, with winning the Super Bowl, the most would be on Green Bay, I would think. Okay. The Rams won it last year. Tampa Bay has won it before. We can look at the 49ers, but they have a split quarterback situation, even though they're under pressure, to get to the Super Bowl. I just don't think it's the same. The Eagles are under pressure just to get better, and getting better is good considering they win the playoffs. That's their pressure point. The Eagles could lose in the NFC Championship game, and their fans will be proud of what they accomplished this year, unless the Eagles commit the silliest of plays, the silliest of blunders. Then it would be another issue. And so it's all about expectations, certain teams. And
Right.
yeah, the Bills and the Packers are the two teams under the most pressure. But I think with the Bills, it's now or never. And Aaron Rodgers, they haven't won the Super Bowl forever since he's been the quarterback. And they've come so close year after year. And when are you going to get over the top? That's the question. At what point do you get over the top? Listen, the Cowboys are under pressure too. But I think I don't think the Cowboy fan base is going to be content with anything but a Super Bowl appearance. After all, didn't the Cowboys make the playoffs last year? They lost a good 49 team, and their fan base treated the year like it was a failure.
Yes. Yeah, especially after going 12-5 and you lose in that first round as poorly as the decision made on that last play. So think about that last play of the game where he ran out and literally he could have slid a little early, like 2 seconds earlier. They'd have been able to get that last play off, and they who knows what could have happened. But
who knows? But they probably don't win the game even with that play. But they're given an opportunity. They're given another play.
correct. That
Who
is
knows
correct.
what
I mean, you
happens.
just never know what's going to happen when that last play occurs. That all being said, obviously that was the exclamation point on failure. I mean, because ultimately they were expecting to go much further than they did. And had they won that game, I mean, it would have been interesting to see them go up against the Rams. Would they have been able to handle the Rams and that defense, the Cowboys defense going up against the Rams offense? Diggs, who actually had a good beginning of the season last year for the Cowboys, had a bad end of the season where they were able to score on him at will, and he had like 7 interceptions in the first 5-6 weeks. So
Pags, you are wrong. Jason Peters is going to be a Dallas Cowboy. He's on their practice squad right now. And when you put a veteran like him on the practice squad, it's only for him to get more work in, to be brought up to the varsity squad. So he's going to be playing games for the Dallas Cowboys. Are you going to feel a little sentimental to see him line up against against the Eagles?
no. I unfortunately I feel like that he should have retired 3 years ago. I think that the game has started to pass him by. He's been a turnstile for the last couple of years, and I understand that it's hard to walk away. When you've played it all your life, it's hard to just walk away and say that I'm done playing. And I feel like that's what he's torn with. He's torn by the idea of the fact that he just can't stop playing. And it's unfortunate because he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I feel that the last few years has started to detract from that. And like I said, he's still going to be a Hall of Famer. He's going to do the things that he does, but he's just not. He's not Jason Peters anymore. My brother told me a few years back when Jason Peters got hurt, in the Super Bowl season. He's like, you have the best offensive tackle in the league, and then you have everybody else because everybody else is not the best one in the league. So ultimately, when you fall from there, when you are no longer the best, you become part of everybody else. And in his case, he's really come down to there's a reason why nobody's been signing him, that he was available to be able to get on the Cowboys in the first place. And I don't think that it's a shame. It's a shame as far as I'm concerned. Chris is mentioning that he's going to he gets hurt. He's injury prone.
Well,
He just doesn't have it
well,
anymore.
We know with Dallas, if they stumble, Mike McCarthy's going to get the main part of the blame. Even if players aren't performing well on the field, they'll point to that. But McCarthy's under the most pressure, and he might get fired in season. That's the impression that people have, even though Jerry Jones isn't too quick to pull the trigger on firing coaches. In Philadelphia, if the Eagles stumble, where's the blame going to come? You would think maybe it's Jalen Hurts, but what happens if the Jalen Hurts individually isn't doing poorly, but the team doesn't quite have it together? Let's say Jason Hurts is adequate, but the team is doing poorly. I'm not sure they jump on Jalen Hurts if that's the case. Who gets the blame? I don't think Sirianni, their coach, gets the blame because, he had a good year last year. Who do they look to pin the blame on?
If the offense is playing well and in games, a lot is going to fall on Gannon. And Gannon is the defensive coordinator. There was questions last year about Gannon. Obviously, he has much better talent this year than he did last year on the defensive side. I think the bigger question is, how are they going to be able to adjust in season? Last year, for instance, we're going up against Detroit, here in a couple days. Jalen Hurts threw for 103 yards in that game because they ran all over Detroit. The rushing game, I think they had 240 yards of rushing, and he only needed to throw for 103 yards. This year, I expect that they're going to throw for close to 300 yards and not rely on the running game as much in this game specific. That being said, it was the rushing game that allowed us to win all those games going down the stretch, because we had the best rushing team last year, bar none. I feel that that's where the biggest things are going to be made. The adjustments made on defense, if he's not able to do what he wants to do, and is he going to be able to switch up to go to a blitz type package and things of that nature? And is the offense, is Nick Sirianni going to be able to understand that maybe the passing game's not working and switch back to a running style offense if that's the case? Those transitions took too long last year. There were extra games we could have won that we didn't win.
You're sounding like a coach show with the viewers. I expect you to bring out your X's and O's now, and it's showing us certain plays. I don't know, Pax, but I'm going to tell you this. You're headed to Detroit, okay, to try to help your team. Last year, the Eagles played at Detroit. They rolled over the Lions, as I recall. And I also remember you were in the what do we call it? The parking lot, the tailgating place,
yep.
or whatever the heck you want to call it. And I'm going to tell you something. I was unimpressed with those Lion fans there. They came they seem like nice people. That's the problem. They were very nice people, but they didn't have their game face on.
They didn't know that they were a little nervous coming up to me because they knew I was doing a podcast and they didn't want to get too involved, real crazy. But I will say this: Detroit fans in general, like the tailgate that I was at, I mean, they have their super fans really go all out, and they have a good amount. And I'll be honest, it's hard to be a Lions fan. It's hard to be able to go
they
and
were
root
cheering for Matthew Stafford during the Super Bowl. They felt like they won in a sense because it was one of their guys there, and that's pretty sad for the organization.
I agree.
I mean, it's okay. It was very nice of the Lion fans and reflected wonderfully on them that they were cheering for Stafford as one of their own because he gave them a lot of years of loyal service as their quarterback. Chances are, we don't know for sure. He might go into the Hall of Fame. And if he goes in, it's probably as a Lion, unless he plays a lot more years as a Ram, then you never know. But their own team's gotten better, Pax. I got to warn you, this is not a gimme for the Eagles. It's a game that the Eagles could lose. There are very few teams in the NFL where you look at their schedule and you figure, oh, this is a weak schedule. I kind of laugh when I see people trying to predict how a team's going to do, and they point their first 5-6 games of the year and say, oh, what a tough schedule. Every game is a tough game, just about. I mean, you go and you play the Giants at the Meadowlands. Now, Giants aren't thought to have a good team, but it's a game that is winnable for the Giants. You play the Jets there, it's winnable for the Jets. A team like the Chicago Bears, I think very little of. You should be able to go into Chicago, beat them. Go into Seattle, I would think beat them, even though Seattle's a tough place to play at. Atlanta. But even those games, kind of anything could happen, when you play those teams. And listen, didn't the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, they beat the Buffalo Bills. And the Bills are thought, they were thought to be a Super Bowl contender last year, and the Jags were weak. So, you never know what could happen. But don't think the Eagles are going to be 1-0. What happens if the Eagles go into Detroit and the Lions shock them there and they win that game?
It's possible. I mean, I'm not putting anything past it, because you do have to play these games. You cannot look past anybody in the NFL. They're all professionals. So these guys they don't want to lose. And it's going to be more on the Eagles to go in there and be ready to play and not look past anybody. You can't look past. First off, it's the first game as of right now, since in the last 11 years, the Eagles are 9-2 on opening day. And they have the best record on opening day during that time span. Now, it's only 11 years, so obviously they didn't go 12 years, because they probably would have went 9-3, and they probably tied with somebody at that point. So I can't really speak intelligently on, what it's been in since the year 2000. That all being said, you can't expect the 44-6 game that we won last year is automatically going to carry over to this year. This isn't baseball where we get to play a 3-game series.
This is a different Lion team. This is a different Lion team. This is a Lion team. I'm going to tell you now, Pax, it's going to have a winning record. How's that?
I don't have them having a winning record. I do have them going 8-9, which is a big improvement from last year.
Okay, I have them about 9-8, but 8-9, 9-8, they're about a 500 team. If there was a 16-game schedule, we might say 8-8. But the Lions might be what the Eagles were last year, getting into the playoffs that way. Tonight, but getting back to tonight's game, we're talking about the pressure on the Bills. You kind of wonder about the LA Rams. I mean, repeating is very hard. I don't have the impression that they have the type of team that's going to go in there and be dominant their second year. Look, the Chiefs, when they won the Super Bowl, they were back the next year. Right. Tampa Bay was back after they beat the Chiefs. They were back in the playoffs, but you got the feeling the same hunger wasn't there. They nearly stole the playoff game against the Rams, ironically, last year. And now you wonder about the Rams. They lose Von Miller. It was a nice acquisition for them coming over. They lost OBJ. That was a nice acquisition last year coming over. But they gained here Bobby Wagner, okay? And Robert Woods, their other receiver who got hurt during the year, wasn't there for the Super Bowl. He's with Tennessee now. And you'd think him and Kupp were fixtures at wide receivers. Why you wouldn't want to have Robert Woods back? I mean, sometimes a guy gets hurt, and that's it for him with the team. They just move on from him. And, I don't always understand that.
Well, and they do have Jefferson, who is a receiver, not Justin Jefferson. Obviously, they have their own Jefferson, but he's obviously hurt today. So it's only going to be really Kupp that's going to be out there, as the receiver. And how good is Stafford going to be? Obviously, he played limitedly in the preseason because he was battling an injury, and that injury is supposed to be a lingering type. So who knows how he's going to really play? I, and then you have the opposite side where you have Buffalo, who's supposedly very hungry, that have all this pressure to be able to make it to the Super Bowl. I find that this is going to be an interesting dynamic in general. I actually have the Bills not making the Super Bowl. I think that they lose to the Chiefs, and that the and that's the AFC Championship game is the Chiefs and the Bills, and they have the mental block with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs kind of do that. Now, is that really going to be the case? Who knows?
Well, what would the game be played? You're talking about mental block.
I would say that this game today, or that happens today, is going to come back to play. So if the Bills win this, that's going to be in Buffalo. If the Bills lose this game, it's going to be played in Kansas City.
But this isn't a tiebreaker game. They're not playing.
Nope. I'm just saying that the beginning of the season, this one game, because the Bills are supposed to win this game. I got to imagine there's a little bit of a hangover for the Rams. That I don't think they're as good a team as they were going into the Super Bowl last year. Obviously they lost Von Miller. Jefferson is out. Matt Stafford has been battling an injury in the preseason, and they just don't. They lost their offensive tackle. They brought somebody else in. There has been some very significant pieces that have changed for the Rams. And I feel that that this is going to be very similar to when they went to the Super Bowl against New England, how the following year they had that layoff and that hangover, and they didn't even make the playoffs. Or they did make the playoffs, but they didn't do very well. I find this is going to be the same situation, that they may make the playoffs because I think that the NFC isn't very strong in general, but ultimately the Rams aren't. I wouldn't bet on the Rams to repeat.
Well, I'm going to tell you the quarterback storylines. You mentioned Matthew Stafford. The Rams can't win without Matthew Stafford, being at the top of his game. Backup quarterbacks have become so valuable in this league, and some teams have the type of quarterbacks. They're not franchise quarterbacks, they're backups, but they're competent guys who've been there before. Like you take Buffalo, Case Keenum. I wouldn't want him as my franchise quarterback, but look, he has started in the league. He had that successful year like about 3 years ago with the Minnesota Vikings. He took them in the deep playoff run. And he was a starter with Denver after that for a while. So some teams have the competent backups, in an absolute emergency. You have that with Philadelphia with Minshew, competent backup. But some teams you kind of wonder about the guys they have. Like Peyton Manning, for example, as great as he was with the Colts, they never really had the type of backup who could come in for him if he was injured and kind of carry a team. Like the ideal situation they really have with the 49ers now. Between Garoppolo and Lance, whoever's playing better, that's great. They could go with either guy. Even the Packers situation isn't so bad if Aaron Rodgers went down. Jordan Love is no Aaron Rodgers, but he already has a couple of years experience with the Packers, and he would be competent enough, you'd think, to get the job done. And you talk about the Steelers. I mean, 3 quarterbacks there. Mitch Trubisky wins the starting job, as was to be expected to me. And everyone was talking about Kenny Pickett, but they didn't get Mitch Trubisky to not win the job. Mitch Trubisky was going to have to lose the job in camp. I mean, let's be honest about it. Sometimes they call for these competitions, and it's not really a competition because they know one guy has to clearly lose the job. Like when Carolina got Baker Mayfield, they said him and Sam Darnold are competing for the job. Can you imagine if Darnold had won that job? It would be, But I think the reason they say they're competing, let's say Baker Mayfield had gotten injured. You don't want Sam Darnold to feel diminished. You want him to think, well, I was competing for it all along. I may have gotten the starting job anyway.
Right.
So, it's a nice scenario there. Like, I think the Steelers are going to surprise people in that Mike Tomlin is going to manage to lead them to a winning record again. Okay, maybe not make the playoffs, but I could see them going 9-8, being a little more on the plus side. They might even go 10-7 because they have a pretty good defense. And Mitch Trubisky is a little bit underrated. They did make the playoffs a couple of years with the Bears, and people look very critically on him, in part because he came out of the same draft, okay, and was drafted ahead of Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. That's what I think people kind of hold against him.
Well, and I look at it as, I mean, you think about Mitch Trubisky, and he was a double doink away from getting to the divisional round in the playoffs. It was his kicker who screwed it up. Cody Parkey kicking another one for the Birds in that playoff game. So we went.
Are we thinking of the Vikings who missed the field goal?
No, Cody Parkey.
Okay.
For the Bears missed a field goal, and Mitch Trubisky was the quarterback of that team. And that was when they had Khalil Mack, on the defense, and that game they held the Eagles pretty strongly, but ultimately they wound up losing the game 16-14, I believe it was the final score of that game. So, I mean, literally, so Mitch has had some winning seasons. It's just that I feel that Chicago got rid of him because they didn't have all the other pieces around him, and they had to blame somebody.
Yeah, well, they went 8-8 that last year. He was in the playoffs and got eliminated. But the fans, I think it's the unrest of a fan base that influences franchises to make certain decisions. If you were under no pressure at all from a fan base at all, a lot of times these teams wouldn't make that decision. Like with the Cowboys with Mike McCarthy, they better, if the fan base didn't get on Jerry Jones, Mike McCarthy'd be there indefinitely. We just saw a comment, and it didn't say the exact names. Well, the Giant backup is better than the starter, meaning Tyrod Taylor is better than Daniel Jones. Maybe, but I will say this. Tyrod Taylor is not your answered starting quarterback. If Tyrod Taylor has to be a starting quarterback going forward, your team, it's just not going to work. Tyrod Taylor is no more than a competent backup at this point. So I don't want to hear Tyrod Taylor's the man.
Well, I think I could somewhat agree. I'm not a big fan of Daniel Jones either. And you know what? Switching to the other New York football team, something came out that Joe Flacco is going to be the starter for the first 3 weeks because they do not expect Zach Wilson to come back till week 4. Thoughts?
I don't want to think about it. Joe Flacco is definitely not your answer. Listen, Joe Flacco had a nice career with the Baltimore Ravens, won a Super Bowl there. Joe Flacco, in his prime, was a good, competent quarterback, okay? A good game manager, but that's where it ended. Joe Flacco was never a difference maker at quarterback. He was never one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. When you talked about who is some of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, when Joe Flacco was at his best, if you talk top 10 quarterbacks, Joe Flacco's name wasn't coming out. The best quarterback to compare Joe Flacco to when he was at his best, maybe a Kirk Cousins, something like that. Competent, decent game.
You know who I compare him to? The other Ravens quarterback that won a Super Bowl, Trent Dilfer.
I think a little bit. He was better than Trent Dilfer, I think.
Just a little bit. Not much, though.
Better than Trent Dilfer. Listen, we can't forget he was a decent quarterback in college. He was drafted number 18 overall in the draft coming out of Delaware.
Right.
Not exactly the biggest college program, Delaware, where they pluck elite quarterbacks. But he's competent, good, but he's not even the same player now. If Joe Flacco hadn't lost a couple of steps, he never would have lost his job to Lamar Jackson, because Lamar Jackson wasn't an elite first round draft pick for, coming out, it would have been hard for Lamar Jackson to break in, but they sat Flacco down during a playoff game, which ought to tell you. And for whatever reason, Robert Salah likes Joe Flacco because I guess Joe Flacco's been around a long time. He can pick up the playbook very quickly. He's got experience, but there's not a lot of upside to Joe Flacco. Not a lot at all, at this point.
It's like
And
having Vinny Testaverde at the end of his career.
but I'm going to tell you what I'm more concerned about, okay? Zach Wilson, we don't know how good he is. And when you invest a number 2 overall pick in someone, you take forever to move on from them. Because if Joe Douglas moved on from Zach Wilson, let's say at the end of this year, he's got to then admit he fouled up the number 2 overall pick in the draft. And people are going to say, well, you could have gotten Kyle Pitts, the tight end from the Falcons. You could have gotten Micah Parsons. You could have gotten Devontae Smith. You could have gotten, numerous players that came out of that draft that were outstanding.
Right.
But so they're going to invest all this time in Zach Wilson, and we're going to have to get an answer at some point. I don't want the Jets to do the same thing the Giants did with Daniel Jones, who was drafted 6th overall, because you made this investment in him. You keep throwing money after that investment, figuratively, over and over and over to try to make that investment work. You don't have that time in the NFL. You have to see a guy progressing. In Miami, it's fine. It's to his 3rd year. He had his rookie year. Not bad, but not as good as you hope, but not bad. 2nd year, there was improvement. He's not an elite quarterback, but he improved in the 2nd year. Now, 3rd year, if he shows improvement again, he doesn't have to be one of the best quarterbacks in the game, but just get better than you are. Show you're getting better. Show you're running upswing. And it's fine. You stick with the guy. But Zach Wilson missing a few games. What happens if Zach Wilson, let me ask you, Pags, missing the first 4 games, plays a few games, gets injured again or whatever, doesn't show you anything in particular to say that he's the quarterback of the future, and the Jets disappoint in their position to get an elite quarterback in the draft, do you take an elite quarterback, or do you feel we have to keep sticking with Zach Wilson because we invested in him? He still has potential.
Here's the one thing I like about Joe Douglas is that he is able to make those decisions better. If you have a year where Zach Wilson plays only half or less than half of the games and you still don't know what you have, you're not able to take that chance. You are going to have to take one of these quarterbacks that come out of the draft, especially if you are back again in the situation where you can get a top 5 pick. That means that you have not moved forward with who you chose from the last time you had a top 5 pick. Now, if you're doing it back-to-back years, it's a different story, but this would be a couple of years in between. And I feel that the Jets would need to do something better with that quarterback. And then you have to then figure out whether, is it worth it for you to have Zach as a backup? Or is it better to maybe trade him away so that he can hold the clipboard somewhere else?
We're talking the blame game, okay? Because that's what goes on. We decided with the Eagles, if they disappoint this year, in all probability, their defense is going to be no better than average. Gannon's going to get the blame. But with the Jets and Giants, the blame is not going to fall with the Giants' new coaching staff. It's their first year. You're given a pass 1 year, unless you're Urban Meyer and you're acting a certain way that's unacceptable to the franchise. So Daniel Jones probably gets the blame there. Okay. Right. With the Jets, Zach Wilson, it probably comes down to maybe Robert Salah now. Maybe Robert Salah. Okay. Because, there's certain expectations. He was given a pass last year with the Jets. But Salah, with all the talking, it could come back to him as well. I don't think that GM Joe Douglas gets blamed because fans are happy with what he did in the draft. They were happy with the move. So what more is he supposed to do?
I definitely don't look like Joe Douglas is the problem. I feel that this is still, I mean, it's taking a few years to get over Gase. Gase really destroyed that franchise for a while. So, and I feel like Douglas is finally now starting to have the upswing. Do I expect that the Jets are going to be as bad as we're talking about? No, but again, that's why you have to play these games. It's possible, especially if this injury keeps lagging or it keeps nagging here, Zach Wilson. I mean, who knows really what's the
I'm
cause of
gonna, I'm
this?
gonna tell you, if someone they had money to bet, and they wanted to make a fortune of money, bet the Jets to win the Super Bowl. I know it's the longest of long shots, but consider this. They really do have a good defense. And, their defensive end that was out all last year, Carl Lawson's back, really good pass rusher. Sauce Gardner at the corner. I mean, they really have a good defense, and they're loaded with receivers, loaded, meaning if Zach Wilson can somehow comes back and all of a sudden he becomes a stud, worthy of the number 2 overall pick, and he looks like a Joe Burrow or something, and everything came together. That you could strike lightning in a bottle sometimes. It's doubtful that that's going to happen. I mean, I look for like a 7-10 record with the Jets this year, which would be, somewhat acceptable to the fan base because they were 4-13 last year. Fan base wouldn't be thrilled, but it would be moving forward a little bit.
Right. I agree. I think that it is. And I think that that's what's happening here, that some teams are able to go from worst to first, but that's because they have some of the pieces in place and injuries that cause them to go from the worst team in the division to the best team in the division. And usually those divisions are tough divisions to begin with, where it's in the Jets case, I feel that the Jets had a few games where they were in it, and then there was a few games that they weren't in it. That division itself is still got a lot of question marks, minus the Bills. Are the Dolphins going to be able to do what they can do to be able to get up into that? To get in the better half and have a winning record. Are the Patriots are who they are? Is Coach Belichick able to have the mystique just around him be able to be enough to win games? Because I think their defense is terrible this year. And I don't know that they have an offense. They have a no-name offense. So, I mean, really, it could be a very, very bad year for the Patriots if things fall the right way.
I'm going to tell you, the Patriots are intriguing. In one end, because of Belichick, we wouldn't be shocked if they make the playoffs. Wouldn't be shocked because of Belichick. We might not expect it, but wouldn't be shocked. But should we be really shocked if they fall off the wagon and go 4-13, 5-12? I mean, we wouldn't be totally shocked with that, I don't think, too. I mean, I don't know what's going over there in New England. Who did you pick to win the Super Bowl? Who is your selections? I picked the Bills over the Packers.
That's it's either going to be, I have the Eagles going. I can only do the four.
Pags, come up with a darn prediction.
I have right now. I have the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Right now, you can't change it as the season goes along.
No, I have the Chiefs and the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And I have the Eagles winning that game.
Eagles winning the Super Bowl?
I don't only see them in the NFC Championship. I can name who I think the Final Four are going to be. And if it's the Final Four that I expect, then I think the Eagles are going to win it.
All along, you said the Eagles are going to the NFC Championship game to lose. And that was good. That's being.
I didn't say that they were going to lose. I just say I can't see past that game. I think that because I thought it was going to be Tampa, and if I thought the Eagles went up against Tampa, I thought that Tampa would win that game in the NFC Championship.
Tampa makes the playoffs this year because I'm going to tell you their offensive line is decimated there. I'm not high on Tampa Bay. I got to tell you something interesting about Tampa Bay. Talk about veteran players. Julio Jones is now on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. To me, one of the 10 greatest receivers in NFL history to me. Julio Jones. I'm talking about Julio Jones in his prime. Phenomenal. Okay.
Right.
But Julio Jones is second team on the Tampa Bay squad, second string. He's not listed as one of their three primary receivers. He's a backup. I guess at this point in his career, that might not be a big deal, but he's also had injury issues. So if Julio Jones is healthy this year and has a lot left, that's going to be a steal for Tampa Bay, and that's going to help Tom Brady a lot to have it.
Well, and I think it's probably good for him to not have as many snaps in the beginning of the season. Save him for the end of the season. You want big name players to come up big in big games. In the beginning of the season, there isn't many big games. You're still trying to figure out who is who and what's what. So if you're going to have a run at the end of the season, because you think about that, OBJ is still going to be somewhere. He hasn't signed with anybody yet, and he's going to wind up going somewhere. And he's going to wind up picking a team that is going to have an opportunity to actually make something happen.
Well, he's not going to have a lot of bidders. What's going to happen with OBJ when he's healthy, a team that really needs a receiver who could be a bit of a downfield threat, they're going to look towards OBJ. Right. Just like he's going to look to pick his spot, a team in contention, whatever he's comfortable with, they're going to look towards him the same way, him being an actual fit, a team that doesn't have much depth there. And they're going to look at him just being with them the rest of the year.
Right.
Okay.
No, and I absolutely understand that. I don't foresee, like I said, you're not going to know where he's going to go until about week 12. And at that point, he's going to make the decision on somebody on a team because he wants to win another chip. Why not collect rings? If you're not going to play all season long, you might as well go with the winner.
You don't know what he's thinking. He might think, well, he already was with a Super Bowl winner last year. He just wants a comfort level. I think these receivers look who's the quarterback, and they also have friends on another team. It could be another wide receiver, like with Cleveland, Jarvis Landry, basically. I don't want to say he didn't recruit OBJ because the Giants made the deal with Cleveland on their own, but he was close with Jarvis Landry, close buddies, so he didn't mind splitting the catches. But I think you want kind of like a comfort zone the two-star receivers have together, like an understanding. You don't always get that.
I think it has more to do with ego. And especially with OBJ, who is a lot of a diva, that it's ego that's going to drive where he wants to go.
He's no longer a star receiver where he could be made the man.
I don't know. When you have over 100 yards in a Super Bowl and then get hurt, like I said, he was very integral part in the Rams winning that Super Bowl, even up until he got hurt, obviously. So they, so much so that the Rams kept his locker. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go back there if the Rams are making a play. But I think OBJ wants rings, and that's what he's going to go for. So it could be on any team.
We don't know when he's eligible to play, but
he's still rehabbing. He's probably going to be able to rehab up until about week 10, and then he's going to be able to start to get into game shape. He's probably already starting to get that now, but it's literally week 10 is about the time when his injury is. That's going to be about the timetable of 9 months. 9-10 months. So we'll see if he goes anywhere in the process of this. But I don't know, a lot going to happen, a lot going on. So and our hour is up. See how quickly it goes when it's only an hour. I thought like we would have a little bit of a hard time since sports was a little light yesterday, but not us. We could talk for about through whatever. So
right, 1 hour show today, not 2. So we're not coming back today, but we'll be with you tomorrow.
That is correct. We'll be back to the 2 hour. Like I said, I have to drive all the way to Detroit. That's a long drive, and I don't want to try to talk to anybody while I'm in the car, headed towards Detroit. So we appreciate
along the way, right, Pags? I mean, you're going to
I got to stop for gas a little bit, but I'm usually one of those guys that goes straight through.
You're not stopping off like fast food or something, have a little bite to eat?
I usually pack stuff with me, so I make some sandwiches for the road and bring them with me. So I pick and the entire way. It's going to be a lot easier for me to do it that way. But it's a 10-hour drive, so it should be a lot of fun. In the meantime, we'll be back tomorrow, 8 o'clock, for our 2-hour episode. Everybody enjoy football. Football is back starting at 8:25. Bills versus the Rams. Everybody enjoy it today, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Everybody have a great day.